Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Let's Go Live with Jack Kelly, Christine in the background, and Valerie Vadala, our special guest. And
Hey,
this
Jack.
this this is awesome. This is gonna be one of the best LinkedIn Live podcasts because it's so important and it's just so crazy. And let me just set the stage real quick. And you probably have seen this already. This young lady, Brittany Peach. Is that how you pronounce her name,
Yes, it
Christine?
is.
Peach?
Yeah.
And basically, she gets on a call, on a video call, and smartly videos it. And basically, she's getting let go by two people. She has no idea who they are. There's a woman and a gentleman. The guy didn't even introduce himself or who he is, just got on the call. And basically, they're about to let her go and having no data, knowing nothing about her, and she is trying her hardest to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? Can I kind of just interject? I just started and I only had about 3 months starting. Where was it? It was like in
August
the
28th.
August, right? Which is the hard, we all know, like as a recruiter
Yeah.
and as an HR person in town, like nothing's going on in August. It's dead. It's so hard to make any traction. And then so it's August, September, okay, October. Before you know it, you're in the holidays. So she was like, didn't have a chance. And and it was like one of the most cringy, awkward, uncomfortable things I've ever seen. And I really am so glad you're here, Valerie. So you could make, I was hoping because you worked at like these amazing companies from Lehman Brothers, Invesco, Shutterstock, you name Oppenheimer, and what's the right thing to do? Because it seems the world is going crazy. Like, what's the right thing to do? Do you just sabotage people nowadays and do a video and let them go? Or like, there
Well,
got
I
to be a
think,
better way.
videos are pretty normal now in terms of layoffs, just because so many people aren't in an office setting. But it should have been her manager, no question, that was a giant misstep in terms of how they managed that. It sounded like she didn't know either of those people, and those people clearly didn't know her. So that was absolutely probably the biggest, although there were a lot of things that they did wrong there, that was probably to me the most heinous piece of it.
Now, why do you think they did that? Why would you put in somebody who has no idea who the person is that you're firing and are going to fire them and not having any data on it either? Like, they didn't know anything about her.
You do that when you don't really care about the employee, when it's just a number. I mean, that's what that is. They are used to doing that. Like she said, she knew a bunch of her coworkers who also got the 15-minute interview on their calendar. And so if they do these, and later we did learn that it was a culling generally of entry level, or of salespeople. I shouldn't just say entry level, but of salespeople that they do, it sounds like, on a quarterly basis. So this is just how they manage it. They don't think of these people as human or even really employees, right? Like they're thinking, culling, like if you think
Mhm.
about what culling means, it's like, think of a herd of cows. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of the way they're thinking about it. So for them, most people are probably just like, okay, I guess I didn't do well. Thanks for the 2 weeks or whatever. And they don't say anything. So they think it's okay to behave that way. And it's not.
How did it get to this place? I don't want to be that guy to be, in my day, it was different. I remember, I've been recruiting for 25 years, and there's definitely much more empathy.
Yeah.
I would speak to an HR person like yourself, a talent acquisition person, however you want to call, the title of the day, and they would be engaged. They
Right.
would give advice and guidance to a job seeker, a candidate, or to the recruiter to help out throughout the whole process.
Right.
Fast forward to now, and it just seems so cold and clinical. Like, how did this happen?
Well, I have a big theory about that.
Okay.
I
All
would say
right.
it started with Jack Welch, CEO of GE in the
Yeah.
80s, and he ruined everything. He vaulted us into late stage capitalism because he didn't care about employees anymore. He had this whole ranking, the ranking that everybody hates so much, bottom 10%. Everybody has to be in the 70%. And then you got 10% people on the top. He created that, and all he cared about was shareholder value. And as soon as shareholder value is the only thing you care about, you no longer care about your employees. And that, I think that's when it started. And it just started chipping away and chipping away and chipping away to this point where we have companies that only care about their quarterly financial reports and what the shareholders do and how the stock goes. And who does that impact? That impacts senior level leaders who have a lot of stock. So those are the people that matter. And everybody else doesn't tend to matter. Not at every company, but that's where the problem kind of started in terms of how I look at it.
It makes sense, but then also, where for the average worker then, where are they gonna be disengaged and non-productive because they're not dumb. They're gonna realize,
Right.
just as you said, they're just maximizing as much money for the C-suite to get, these boatloads of stock and options. So then, like, why are you gonna work hard? That's
Yeah,
right? And that's why we got the Great Resignation, act your
exactly.
wage, bare minimum Monday, and, like, it's easy to mock these TikTokers who do this, but they're not wrong,
They're
right?
not
They're
exactly.
not wrong.
Yeah, and I was quite frustrated that a lot of media outlets were kind of turning it towards this whole situation with
Mm,
Brittany into Gen Z, and they're lazy and look what they do, and she wasn't a good performer and now she's made this whole thing.
mm.
And I was like, why? Somebody tell me why Gen Z should behave differently when they are treated so badly, and there is no loyalty. And so why do we expect them to be loyal if companies aren't giving that back to them? It doesn't make sense to me.
For Gen Zs, and I gotta admit, I'm partial because I have 2 Gen Z
Me too.
kids.
I love my
So
Gen
so
Zs.
I'm very partial, and I get their vibe because
Yeah,
they look at
yeah,
someone like myself who would schlep into Manhattan, you know, taking 3 hours
yeah.
back and forth and being tired and cranky when I get home because of working so many hours, and then they see, like, their parents, friends get fired and laid off. So of course they're jaded. Of course they're like, "Hey, this
Oh,
is."
exactly.
They
You know
they
what?
know the
I could go
deal.
on about this, Jack. I think they're going to save the world. They kind of have to because what
Yeah.
we're handing them is a steaming pile, you know. But I think that they are being handed such a difficult like the offering, politics, climate, job market. There's so much that's just so broken. And I think that it's going to be up to them. And so when people say, they're just they don't care and they're not committed, they're not dedicated. This is the response that they're giving. They're going to take care of themselves because we did not you and I, we've been great parents, of course, but like the world did not take care of them. And so they're going to take care of themselves and let's watch them do it. I totally cheer them on.
I agree with you because I think, what is it like, that whole, there's an expression, I'm not gonna even bark because I'm gonna mess it up, but hard times make tough people, you know what I mean? That
Yeah,
kind of thing. So
yeah.
I think for them, they're going through tough times. So it's going to make them hard and make them have to figure out what to do to rescue themselves for all the mess that we made. And I don't know. I think you're Gen X as well, right? I
Yes.
imagine. So I think there's a very similar attitude between the Gen X's and the Gen Z's. This like, libertarianism mindset. There's like, hey, you know what? We'll just do what we got to do, head down. Like it's just I think it's very different than other
Well, I was going to
generations.
say the big difference is that we were still behaving. We
Mhm,
still knew we had to kind of do what we were told,
yeah,
that like the Peter Gabriel song, like, we're
mhm.
just like, we kind of put our heads down and we did what we had to do. Whereas Gen Z and I don't even think that they're lazy or any of those things. I think they're figuring out, and this is another thing I love about them. They're figuring out how to do things more efficiently. Like,
Mhm.
why do you have to do all this stuff, right? It's not necessary to get the job done. And I want a 3-day work week as a result, or whatever it is, and I love that they are figuring that out, which we didn't do. We just kind of took it, right? Didn't we just take it like we were right behind ours?
You didn't even
We took
question
it.
it, Valerie,
Yeah.
right? Because you would just feel, okay, I had to go and commute. I was, you know, my wife and I, we lived in Manhattan, right? And then we had 1 kid, 2 kids, and we're like, oh, you know what? We should go to the suburbs. And then the suburbs, I didn't realize the commute is horrible, but you just like, that's what you got to do. Now, for like Gen Zs, they're like, why do you have, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
Work, very least work
Right.
hybrid, go twice a week to go. And why do you got to go back and forth and ruin your whole life and have no quality of life whatsoever? So they're
Especially when
onto
we're being
something.
treated like we just saw, right? Like
Yeah.
why do that? there's no kind of obligation. There's no feeling of like, I need to be loyal to this person, to this company.
Now, how can it change? How can it bring it back from where it is now, where there's ghosting? And at this point, people just like shrug their shoulders up. I was ghosted. It's, you know what I mean? It's not even they're mad anymore. They're just, of course I was ghosted.
Yeah,
Of course I didn't
exactly.
get any feedback. Of course, they don't tell me what's going on. H- Is it possible to salvage it and turn it around, or is just things going to be really messed up for a long time?
Well, I think that there are still companies that are doing it right. That, like, I mean, it's really about just managing your employees with empathy, right? Like just remembering. Like I always like in my head, I keep thinking I want to start a podcast and I want to call it the H stands for human,
Hmm.
because human resources, like when people say the people, whatever, I like human resources better because it's like human. Like what? Like why are we not bringing humanity back into corporate America? And I think that companies who figure that piece out, who legitimately care and maybe make decisions sometimes that are better for their employees, and that might mean they have a bad quarter or two. Like if people are brave, if companies are brave enough to do that, I feel like we can turn it around. And in terms of like the ghosting and all of those things, I'm careful about this because sometimes when I'm really busy, I worry that I've dropped the ball and not gotten
Hmm.
back to a few people, but I'm really, really on top of, calling people if I've spoken to them, emailing people if I haven't, all of those things, because I understand what it's like to be on the other side of that table and what it's like, how vulnerable you are. And it's like understanding the vulnerability of candidates or employees and respecting that. It's not that hard, right? It should be natural, but it's
Right.
not.
And it's not. It just feels like it's okay to treat job seekers and candidates rudely, not get back to them, not offer feedback. Now, to be fair, I wonder, I'm curious, do you think it could be that couple of things? One, I remember back in the day, we really just use the phone, so there's no hiding from somebody.
Yeah.
Now, with all the technologies, you can kind of hide behind the technologies. And then also, I think what happens is that everybody's a little afraid that if, let's say, I say something, and now maybe I'm saying I'm going to be a racist or sexist or this or thatist, and we're lawsuit happy in this country, so it's easy to say nothing because then you don't have to worry if you say
Right. They're
nothing.
afraid.
Do you
Yeah.
think that's kind of is that are those some of the things that are going on maybe? Or
I mean, I know that and you mean you and I have the same job recruiting, right? And so the worst part of our job is signing off candidates, telling them they didn't get a job,
yeah.
right? So there is a little bit like some candidates are like, I want more information. I want to know
Mm,
more. And sometimes it's just, even though there was totally innocent, there was just
yeah.
a for a candidate it isn't, there's landmines, right? It's still not an excuse, is it? Like, you can give them platitudes. You just owe them the respect of letting them know they didn't get the role. So I do think there's some risk, but I don't think it's good enough reason not to treat people better.
Now is it a management thing that like senior execs don't really know what's going on in their HR group and they're unaware of how they're treating their people, the people?
I don't know. I feel like HR should be such an important function within an organization. The CEO should have a very strong relationship with it. They should know what's going on. I think it's a cop out to say that it's all HR's fault. I feel like, but I do think that if you don't have strong leadership within HR, senior leadership, it's going to impact the culture immensely. I mean, I think that they're close to the heart of what an organization is. And so I think you do need leaders who care about all of the employees.
So this is not a fair question to ask, but if let's say you had the chance to say, hey, you're going to ABC Widget Company International and you could design, an empathetic psychological safety type of environment, how can you rebuild the HR function that maybe could take care of a lot of these issues and make it better for everybody involved with the process?
Well, it's fun. Like I have to like my fantasy of a good
Yeah.
HR function, right? I think that really good HR is evolving, whereas it used to be kind of the bottleneck. The cops are the bottleneck. You need to get HR's approval before you do this, and that was kind of their source of power, was
Mm.
just like making sure that like you have to do everything through us, and
Hmm.
And that's changing in good HR organizations. And there's their employee self-service and manager self-service, things like that, so that it's not all that you need their approval and everything. And what it should be more is like we HR professionals should be looking at employees almost like a CRM, like in sales. Like
Mhm.
there are customers or there are clients. Like, we need to make sure that we are serving them. And that's not there now. Like, we don't think we're serving them. We think it's like a pain, right? Or like, oh God, this one or that one. But if and that is kind of where really strong HR functions are evolving to a place where you are serving the employees and making sure you're taking care of them in multiple ways, right? And so I think that that would be my big thing. My big takeaway would be, okay, I have to have a good relationship with the senior leadership team and the CEO. I have to have a good relationship with them, but they're not my client. That's my client. Managing up is lovely, manage down. Like that's how I would feel.
Yeah, now, is that possible, do you think? Is it salvageable or
I think there are companies that do it already. They
yeah.
do. I mean, there are places that are still good to work, right? Chobani seems like a really great place. I've heard HubSpot is really good. I mean, there are some very strong heads of HR that understand what needs to happen. I mean, when I see companies that do not have strong cultures, the CEO and the head of HR, like that's where it's coming from, you know?
So this leads to something for people who are curious to say, "Hey, how do I get if I'm looking for a job or I wanna move, how can they find out, like, what are the companies that do have the things that you mentioned? Is there a way to find it out or
As an in-house recruiter, I'll say that Glassdoor is the bane of our existence, but I give it a lot of credence. And the reason I do is that I've owned that Glassdoor relationship in a couple of companies, right? And so I know, like, you'll always get the hotheads or the people,
right?
the ones that were like, oh, they were wild cards, right? Usually they're typing in all caps. That's your hint that maybe you
Yeah.
could just throw that one aside. But you can go onto Glassdoor and look for themes within organizations and see, like, just look at all the negative reviews and see if there's a theme, see if the same thing keeps coming up. And if it does, it's probably true. And I mean, I would say anything less than like 3.8, you start questioning. Anything less than like 3.5 in terms of a rating is probably not a strong culture. So I think that that's a
Yeah.
really good way of knowing. But the other thing is like really kind of kicking the tires when you're interviewing, seeing how you feel when you interview, seeing what the process is like. Did they respect me or did they have me meet with so many people and then kind of drag me along and then say, oh, you have to meet with other people? Did they make me do homework? All of those things, right? Think about that and think about, I talk about this a lot to people that are interviewing. You're interviewing them too. Just remember that. It's not just about if they like you, you got to like them too. And it's a giant misstep if you accept a job and you're like, you know what? It didn't feel right to me. So I think that that's some of the ways that you can figure out. But I've gotten it wrong. It happens.
What about, I think you hit on something too, which I know drives people crazy, where you have this unending interview cycle
Yeah.
where you just on and on and on. What's why is that? Is that people just afraid to make a decision or how, like,
Yeah.
why does this go on?
The thing this is what makes me bananas about it. And I know for external search people, it's the
Yeah.
worst, right? Ugh. But so this is what makes me crazy. During the Great Resignation, everybody, like companies were like, okay, we got to make these offers. We got to shorten the process. We got to, and that worked fine. But
Yeah.
as soon as all of a sudden there was more talent, they're like, oh, we can treat them like crap again. Let's have them meet with the 8 people. I'm like, did that matter before? Why do they have to meet with 8 people now? And it's just kind of like the return to office thing, right? As soon as they didn't have to offer hybrid or remote, they were like, no. And I hope people remember that because at some
Yeah.
point the market's going to be crazy again, and then they're going to be like, okay, you can have your summer Friday or whatever it is, right? And then remember that they only give it to you because they have to. That's the only reason they will.
So you're saying it's always that power dynamic where if the
Yeah.
employers call the shots and they have the leverage, they're going to pull those levers and they're
Yeah.
going to do what they want to do. And if the job seekers have that leverage, they're going to kind of try their best to get what they want to do.
Yeah, and I'm sure you had the same experience. Like, listen, candidates were not fun to deal with during the Great Resignation. Every offer was a negotiation, even if you gave them what they asked for in the beginning of
Yeah.
the interview process. Everybody was doing it. And so I can't say they didn't drive me crazy, but I can say that I am enough of a socialist that I was like, more power to the people. I respect it. It's
Yeah.
great.
Well, because that's their opening, like, you don't often have it. It's more
Yes,
usually, more
right.
often than not, the employers have it. So, like, that once in a while when the
Yeah,
window is open, that little bit of crack, you wanna take advantage of it, right? Like,
exactly.
because it
I was
doesn't happen
cheering them
too
on. I
often.
was cursing them and cheering them on
Yeah.
both at the same time.
Yeah. But what it doesn't make sense too, Valerie, is this. If somebody goes, let's say you're a mid-level white collar professional or an executive, and you have to go through 5, 6, 7, 10 different, interviews over the course of 6 months, that's not helpful to the bottom line for companies because that means you're wasting all the time for those execs who are interviewing this person and they're not doing their job. So
I
that even
yeah,
doesn't make sense either.
no, and I loved Credit Suisse had a policy when I
Yeah.
was there that like there was a certain time, maybe it was 6 months. I wish it was
Yeah.
even shorter, where if you had not filled a job in that time, you got the headcount taken away.
Yes.
And I think they should do that to managers because like you clearly don't need it. Like you could have found somebody by now, right? And I think that that should just be a policy in general, and it should be more like 4 months. I mean, and there might be some that are very hard to fill because
Mhm.
there's only a few talent, a little bit of talent, and those would be exceptions. But generally speaking, if you can't fill it in 4 months, take it away.
Do you think people, like, are just scared to make a decision? You're a
Yes.
manager and you're afraid, and you're not gonna admit you're afraid because no one wants to say that, out loud, but, like, they're afraid. So instead of saying, "Hey, I'm afraid to make a decision," they're like, let's look at another candidate.
Yeah.
Let's put out the job, listing again."
I think
And
it's two things. I think it's a
yeah,
fear of risk, like not
right.
wanting to take a risk, but it's also like I'm not on dating apps now, thank God.
Mhm.
But like there's apparently so much choice. I'm swiping right here as I say that, that you're always like there FOMO, right? There might be somebody better. There might be somebody better. And I think with all the technology available, and especially when markets are bad, it's like I'm going to take my time because there's probably somebody
Mm.
even better. And it's not a productive way to think at all. But I think that that's kind of what's happening there.
Yeah, I see that a lot where,
Yeah.
they feel I like Valerie, but let's see if there's someone better. I like Jack, but let's see. And it just creeps and it just goes on and
Yeah.
and nothing changes. It just keeps going and going and going. Um, and for the job seekers, it's just torture,
Torture.
right? It's like
Actually, this is
torture.
not something I should really admit, but as a recruiter, I have advised people that I'm training in recruiting.
Mhm.
Like, if you're talking to a hiring manager and they're telling you about the job and you're like, I literally know the perfect candidate. Do not submit that perfect candidate first. Give them a few like mediocre or like okay candidates. Because if you give them a perfect candidate first, they're going to be like, there must be 10 other on that grocery shelf, just like them or better. I want to meet them all. Like, because it's just the way they think. It's like,
Okay.
not going to meet the best person first, right? It's just not going to
Uh,
happen. They
uh,
don't.
uh, all right. Now, all right. We'll talk. Inside baseball, what happens? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's called like we would refer to as cannon fodder, where you would send out resumes and they're meh,
Yeah.
meh, they're okay. It was like you wouldn't send like embarrassing, like terrible, right? But they'd be okay. But you knew in your back pocket you had two or more who were like
Yeah.
dynamite. So
Yep.
after seeing the meh, you see the
Yeah.
dynamite candidate, and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, this is
And
great. Yeah,
and you know what? You could say that it's like design or something. It's not. It's
yeah,
a psychology thing. Because
yeah.
if people will definitely think, oh my God, like, even at a store, you try on a pair of jeans and you're like, damn, I look fab. You're gonna want to still see, well, maybe there's other ones that look even better in. Like,
Right,
it's
so if
just
you send the best one first,
yeah,
then you have to get someone better, and chances are you're not gonna you saw the
yeah,
best one, and that's it. There's
yeah,
not a better one. You're done, and then it's hard for them to believe, and they'll say, "Jack, can you get me another slate of candidates?" I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh, right, okay, I'll get a slate of $300,000 kind of candidates in this
Yeah.
small little niche."
Yeah.
That's art, of course, yes. It's like pulling up, something off the grocery,
Yeah,
aisle. Like, okay, here's some
exactly.
cereal. Like, it's crazy. It's
Oh
so
boy.
bizarre. It's
Why do we still love this job, Jack?
I don't anymore. That's why I've been writing a lot. That's why I've been I'm figuring I'm getting too old. I'm being very straightforward. I figure, how much can I keep doing this before I drive myself crazy? So that's why I started writing for Forbes and I've been doing podcasts. So I
I love
figure,
your pivot. I love your pivot. It's awesome.
because I figure, you know what? I could do that like being super old. You know what I mean? Because with recruiting, for people who don't know, they think it's so easy. Oh, hey, you're recruiting. It just takes so much out of you. It's a
Yeah.
sport. It's like to me, it's a
Yeah.
sport. And you got to be on your game all the time. And you got to find that candidate before someone else does. And
And I think
the
being
ups and
in church is
downs.
so much harder. I really do. I mean, like you have your own headaches in-house, but I
Yeah.
was in search too, and I respect you for having done it for as long as you did. But I'm actually kind of having a moment right now myself because I've always, like anybody who knows me knows, I've only been a recruiter in HR. It's the
Mhm.
only thing I'm interested in. I'm passionate about it. I love it. I feel like we build people, we build cultures. I will go to my grave saying it is one of the most important functions in a company if it's done right. I will say all those things. And I will also say that in October, me and like a lot of my team got laid off. And the only other time this happened to me was Lehman Brothers when it failed in
Mhm.
2008. And I realized that recruiters are considered kind of like contractors in a way, right? Like it, and I understand, like, okay, we don't need you so much now, so you're kind of not doing a lot right now. But that does, like, I just feel like I don't know. Like I think I'll stay in it just because it's what I love and what I do
Right.
and those things. But like I wish we could unionize or something. It's like you can't just do like then hire us as contractors and pay us ridiculous amounts of money and like, maybe we can get some sort of healthcare. I don't know, but like it feels like recruiting when the market's great, they have our we have our feet to the fire all the time, right?
Right.
And then when the market sucks, it's like I don't want to deal with you. Get away. So I'm kind of, that's my struggle right now with recruiting. I love the job. I love it. I love leading teams, all of that stuff. But I'd like to be somewhere where they don't think of us as, temps.
It's, and I belong to a lot of these Facebook recruiting groups, and they just are crushed. They're like, "What do I do now?" It's a lot of them, the conversation isn't even, "Do I pivot to a different type of recruiting?" But it's like, "Okay, what else? What other
Yeah.
skills do I have that are transferable? Do I go to mortgage sales? Do I go to this?" Because
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. It just goes around in circles. Okay, things will go hot, so now they need you. It's cold, so boom,
Yeah.
you get cut. And then there's only so much you could go through those cycles between before you just
Done. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn. My feed is filled with recruiters that are
Mhm,
just it's kind of funny because you see all these like economic indicators, and I'm glad we're not falling into recession at all.
mhm,
But I'm like, where are they getting those numbers? Because I mean, they're like recruiters are just really suffering right now,
mhm,
right? And I don't know what to say. It's funny because tomorrow I promised a friend of mine that I'd talk to her niece who wants to get into recruiting, which is just adorable that somebody like most of us stumbled into it by accident,
the
right?
same, yeah.
But she wants to get into it, and like I'm like, God, it's hard for me to talk about it right now because I'm gonna have to tell her, be prepared, save some money, like you might get laid off.
Yeah.
So which is sad.
See, for me, for the longest time, I loved it so much because I really, and this is sound corny, but I mean it. I really felt I was helping people and doing a great job because, you know, if you find somebody and they're unhappy where they are and you can get them a better place, more money, more opportunity,
Totally.
oh my God, it's like you
So
feel so great. And then you get paid for it too. Then you're like, wow, this is fantastic.
I'm
So
with
it's an
you.
awesome feeling. But then what's happened is all the things we've talked about and just how things are just so corroded within, the HR talent acquisition and just in general with like the whole workplace
Yeah,
that
everything feels transactional.
it
And
just, right?
yeah, yeah, putting your heart into yeah, and just like because I tend to when I'm interviewing candidates, I don't just look at it from our side, the company side.
Hmm.
Like I want to make sure that the candidate will come in and flourish, will be happy. And I don't think that that happens very much anymore, where just in general, I think that recruiters are put their feet are put to the fire or else they're like limited by comp or they're situated, like whatever it is. And it's just like, I just want to fill this job. And that's not going to build good cultures. And it's also you're just bringing more people in to have soul sucking jobs, right? And that's, I don't know. I always, because I'm with you. Like I love, like Indeed once gave me a t-shirt that I still wear to bed and it says, I help people get jobs. That's what we
Mhm.
do. Like, how cool is that? You know, I mean, that's a great job. But yeah, it has changed. I agree.
Yeah, like I would have, I would just blow my mind where maybe, 20 years ago, place someone at 40,000 and then now they're 400,000. Well, I'm just making up numbers. It's like, wow. Like, obviously I can't take credit for everything, but I figure I could take some small measure of, of feeling like, wow, I helped this person truly change their life,
No, I
change
love
the
that.
whole scope of everything, and it's amazing. And you don't think of that in recruiting. Most people would like roll their eyes if they, they're hearing this conversation, but it's true.
Yeah.
When you're able to get on that trajectory, right, and be able to keep going higher, making more money, have a better title, your life and your family's life is so much improved. It makes a huge difference.
It's even, I would say it's almost even better when you're in house because you can see them kind of continue to flourish,
Mm.
develop and everything. And you're like, oh, I hired that person. I picked that person. You know, like I found that person, you know? And yeah, it is. Oh, that's making me warm and fuzzy, Jack.
Well, you know what is? It's so funny because I was speaking to Christine about this before, is that what would happen is, turn back the clock, is that let's say you were a person I was dealing with from inside, you're working for the
Yeah,
company and we're working on a couple of hires. We would have back and forth every day, day in, day out for like months. Then we'd place maybe one or two people. And then you didn't need me anymore. And it's weird. And I'm like, oh, this is so sad. Like, wait,
yeah,
what just happened here? Because you had this great rapport, this great relationship.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Then,
it's interesting because I don't know. Is your company still called Compliance Search?
yeah.
So, and you used to be contingency. I don't know if you are anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. We do consider, that's
Yeah.
the base, which is like
So,
the
so
craziest,
my
hardest
Yeah, well, yeah, and
contingency.
it's so hard. And so my thing is, I prefer to be exclusive with a
Yeah.
contingency firm. I don't like to throw something out to a bunch of contingency firms because I want to build the relationship and I want you like you to have a shot instead of like you calling and somebody else already called them and it waters down the job and our reputation and it's not fair to the search firm. So I do try to build relationships with search firms and like I want them to know us, right? And I want them to like think of us as a favorite client so that they'll really sell us to their candidates. But I don't think a lot of places do that. A lot of places are just like, I'm not paying them unless they place. So let's just put it out there.
It's so interesting. Yeah. So this is again a little bit for everybody here, a little inside baseball. We're showing what goes on behind the scenes. Yeah. So like if you're a contingency, that means you only get paid if you place that person. And you could put in hours and
Yeah.
hours and weeks and months. And if you don't come up with it, nothing.
Yeah.
Uh, eat what you kill, which is a horrible, like,
I know. I know.
way to describe it, but that's what it is. And then what happens, and it's not good for the candidates either, because you'll send it out to 10 different recruiting firms. The company's recruiting themselves. They post it on all the job boards.
Yeah.
And then the candidates feel like, oh, I have no chance. Like
I
it's
know.
all over. What are my odds now of getting it? So I'm not going to even bother.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think that that's a good model. And I don't think you end up necessarily getting the best candidate that way either. You know, I do think like I think you and I just
Yeah.
relationships will always matter, right? And you know, relationships with search firms, relationships with hiring
Yeah.
managers, relationships with candidates, like they'll always matter to me.
We started talking about this before we went live, and I'm curious. Like it to me, it seems, and I think you may feel the same way in the workplace, in recruiting, HR, but then put in any other, it just feels different than it used to. There's more toxicity, there's more anger, there's more
Yeah.
worry, there's more stress. I mean, is it me or it just feels that way,
Oh, it is.
right?
Yeah. I mean, and I won't even touch on the political landscape, Jack,
Yeah.
because that's a whole other hour. However, I think that social media, and even like cancel culture, like, and I
Mhm.
say that while I cheered Brittany on, right? But like cancel culture is tough, right? And but at the same time, like what Brittany did, a lot of people maligned, right? But I saw some meme once about like people think racism is getting worse. It's not. It's just that we're filming it now, and
Mhm.
that's kind of what I thought with the Britney thing, where it's like, how long has this been going on? How long have employers been treating employees like crap like
Mm.
this? And that's why I cheered her on, because I'm like, yeah, we need to know about this. People need to know about this when they're choosing employers. But anyway, it sounds like I'm digressing, but I'm really not. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, I think that social media and just the fact that everything is digital and that you have to present yourself for that versus just us talking, changes everything. And unfortunately, it brings out the mean in a lot of people.
It does feel that way because, like,
Yeah.
if you're online, let's say from a guy's perspective, right? If I'm in real life and I say something to another guy, I run the risk of getting punched in the nose and beat up, right? So, like, I'm not going to be a jerk to that person, for my own safety. But
Yeah.
online, no one thinks twice about
I
saying
know, being totally
horrendous
mean.
things because it's online.
It's so true. I like follow some women that do like weight training because I'm trying to
Yeah.
do it right. And like people, and they'll say like, "Oh, I'm 50 and I'm doing this," and people will and say, "You look like you're 65." And I'm like, "Well, would you have said that to her in real life? Like, like you would
Wait,
have been
why is that necessary? Wait, why is it
why?
like necessary to add that?
So
That's so,
mean."
see, I wonder, see, this is a theory, and I think you were touching on it before the show. Is that like it, we're like our society seems just so corrupted. It's so effed up, right? It's so messed up. There's so much anger, so much angst, so much animosity. And of course, then it gets into the jobs, the job market, it gets into the workplace. And that's why I think everyone's just miserable. And when you're all miserable, it's hard to do a good job anywhere, whether recruiting, HR, being a CTO, whatever it is. It's just like, it just angry. Everybody's like angry. Am I crazy or is
No,
it
no,
just,
no, it's totally true. It's definitely again, and then we expect Gen Z to be so
yeah,
delightful in the office. Come on, this is what we're facing. This is what they're dealing with.
right?
This is their reality. And no, and I think that it does come back to like if bring it right back to the Britney thing and Cloudflare, which is hard
Mm.
to say. Um, but like empathy, just be decent human beings. It's not that hard. It's not that hard, and I don't know why so many people struggle with it and so many organizations, well, organizations I know, it's that shareholder
Yeah.
value again. It's this number, it's not the people that are creating that number that matter.
See, that's the thing too, right? Because there's such a difference between when you look at what these CEOs and C-suites are making in terms
Right.
of, is particularly in terms of stock options and stock grants and all that kind of stuff. It's unbelievable. It's just it's like out of control. Like,
Yeah,
are you saying this CEO or this CFO is not going to take a job for only $10 million? Like
I
you have to be
know.
50 million,
I
100
know.
million, and then you lay off 10,000 people and that person's getting, $100 million. I'm not a socialist or anything. I'm a capitalist, but to me, that just it's
I
it's
know.
nuts.
It
It's
doesn't make sense.
it's
I know.
nuts.
I don't get it either.
And then
Um,
how do you expect someone to be motivated to get up in the morning, be excited just to make that person another $100 million? And
yeah. And
right?
then the whole question of like you screwed up in workforce planning, right? Either your performance really faltered, which probably
Mhm.
wasn't that person's fault directly, and or you just hired like great resignation. Like we were like Lucy with the chocolates, like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like never did they stop and say that maybe we don't need to backfill that, or maybe we really don't need five more engineers in that group, or maybe they never said it. They all like I mean like Google and Meta, and I heard this from recruiters that worked at Google and
Mhm.
Meta. They were, they pay ridiculous amounts of money because they make ridiculous amounts of profit, right? And they were actually when engineers were like the hottest thing in the world, they were hiring people they knew they didn't need because they did not want the competition to hire them. They
Mhm.
were actually doing that. So when you hear Google's laying off like 5,000 people or whatever, it's because they hired people they didn't need. Like that's crazy. Like it's just unkind to do that. It's almost like they paid people to sit on the bench, like, and not get a job where they could have flourished and not gotten laid off. I mean, that's crazy, but that it happened.
I remember seeing those TikTok videos of recruiters at Meta getting like $195,000 and they were working for, let's say 6, 9 months. Didn't place anybody. No pressure to place anybody.
I
Just like you're
know.
saying, they're just
Yeah,
kind
they want
of,
to make sure nobody else hired them.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, can you imagine a company making that much money to do something that like ridiculously impractical? It's crazy.
And then
Yeah.
you're right, because then what happened? Now, here's something that I'm seeing now that's to me, and we're going to do a LinkedIn Live later this week about it, is in 2022, 23, you had these big 10,000 layoffs here, 10,000 wherever. Now I'm noticing, first of all, I started seeing it during the holidays, which I don't know if maybe like I'm forgetting, but I've never saw people getting laid off en masse during the
Oh,
holidays.
I
And when
know,
that
right?
happened, that really shook me. I was like, wait, what? This was like an unwritten thing.
Don't
Uh,
do it, right?
we,
Like really
right?
before Thanksgiving, you just stop,
And,
like that. Yeah.
and there was a lot of major companies laying off. And I really was like, well, is it me? Am I just not remembering things correctly? Now, what I'm seeing is that, and I've been writing about this too, is they're getting these small little layoffs, right?
Yeah.
But like Google, Alphabet was saying, but we're going to keep doing it. And
Yeah.
to me, that's like horrible because you never know when you're going to be the one to let go. So you got to go to work every day worried, am I going to be that next group of 100 or
And
50?
and you know what? It's even more egregious than that because I mean there are multiple reasons why they do it that way, but one of them is they're trying to evade the WARN Act, which is a federal act that says if you lay off a certain percentage of people within like in a certain like state or whatever
Mhm.
within like let's say 60 days or something, you have to pay them 60 days notice plus severance. So it's a lot more expensive. Like when I was let go from Lehman, the Warren Act saved me. Like I ended up getting 2 extra months because that was in place because it was a massive layoff. So they're evading that by doing those little trickles.
Wow. Wait, wait, wait. So
Besides,
let me
yeah,
understand this and for everybody to say. So, okay. So you had these big layoffs in 2022 and
yeah.
2023, and now like smaller, a little bit, but a lot. So what do they do? The WARN
So
Act is
I don't know the like specifics of
okay.
the right, but it's essentially, and I think every state kind of has its
Mhm.
its own version of it, but it's an act where if you let's say I think it might be 15%. If you lay off 15%
Mhm.
of your workforce in your New York office, you have to give them 60 days notice, which either means they work those 60 days and you pay them and you've notified them, or you just pay
Mhm.
them. Usually that you just pay them and say go and plus severance. So it ends up being a lot more expensive. So they'll go to the point where it's just below that number so that they don't have to pay that. Yeah.
See, this is the problem. So they're going to game it out
Yeah.
just to get away with it, you know?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you and I, if we're working every day, we got to worry, is my number going to be up?
Right.
Right? It's like water torture. Like,
But they
oh
but
my,
they don't even understand how that's going to hurt productivity so
how
much.
can you be productive? It's
No,
impossible. How, you know,
yeah,
and you're going to work harder and longer because you're scared and you want to keep
yeah.
your job. But that's not a way to live.
I know. Yeah. No. So I don't know. It like again, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's always about that shareholder value. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. I mean, like I think that if we start caring about humans again, things could look different.
I agree because you know, to me, and I don't know, I'm not the CEO, maybe I'm not too bright, but it just seems that if you take care of your workers and you're empathetic towards them and you give them the things that they want and they need, listen to their feedback, they're going to be engaged.
Right.
And if you treat them
Yes.
fairly too financially and the ones on top not be pigs about it,
Right.
if you're going to be engaged, you're going to work harder, better, smarter, and your company's going to do better. And then it's going to be easier to retain people, easier to recruit people. So, like to me, it seems so common sense.
On a micro
But
level, Trader Joe's, like
mhm.
everybody there seems happy.
Yes,
They're always really helpful. They pay very well and
yeah,
they offer
yeah.
healthcare. That like, you know what? Like you're respecting your employees right there, and then you're gonna get the best and you're gonna get people that are engaged and it doesn't take much.
All right. So I guess the bottom line is we got to hope that our kids, Gen Zs, are going to like see all these things and say, hey, we're going to have to make it better. We're going to have to change it. And somehow we have to help. Like, I think this is helping by having these conversations because I bet you, Valerie, a lot of people who are watching it now or watching it,
Right.
whenever they see it online, it's like, oh man, I thought it's just me going through that. I thought, there's a black cloud over my head. I did something wrong or
Yep.
what have you. And
Yes.
hopefully they realize, oh man, this is like the situation. This is why I'm having a hard time finding a job. This is why I'm having a hard time keeping a job because from what we're talking about, we're giving, collectively like what, 100 years of experience,
Oh, yeah.
in this space,
Yeah.
so that they could realize, hey, it's not just you. These are things. Now, it may not make it better right away, but at least they feel a little better. Like, oh, okay, it's not me. It's not
And it's
that I
not,
did
it's
something
not
wrong.
personal. But here's
Yeah.
the thing is that like as somebody who has been laid off, it is personal. That's the
Hmm.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
you can say it's nothing personal, it was numbers, we didn't need that, blah, 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 blah. You can say those things, and the truth is
Yeah.
that if it happens to you, it's personal. And again, that's why you have to have the empathy, and you have to understand that that's what they're going to feel. Like I once, a long time ago, had a LinkedIn post about this, but when I was let go from Lehman, like, I mean, they were getting rid of everybody. Like, in fact, my boss was like crying when she gave me the package and she'd already been laid off. Like, it was just like, it was done. And so I got it, and I'm like, okay, I knew it was coming and all that. And the next day, I think it was, I was on the subway, I had a doctor's appointment or something, and I burst into tears on the subway. I just burst into tears, and I
Mhm.
had to get off because I didn't want to be the person crying on the subway, right? So I had to get off. I was on a park bench, like that lower Manhattan, and I'm sobbing, like ugly crying, like hiccups and everything, because it is personal.
Yeah.
It's awful. Whoever gets laid off, somebody's still there. And you're
Yeah.
like, they chose that person over me. And anybody that says, so I get it. I'm just telling everybody that's ever gotten laid off, it sucks. And it is nothing personal, but it's personal to you. And I get it. It sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully it's going to turn. Hopefully, it'll turn around. And you mentioned about, doing an HR podcast. I think you'd be great at it. If you want any help or advice, I'd be glad to help you out
Thank
because
you. You'd
I
be my
think
first
that's,
guest, Jack.
yeah, hell yeah, sure. I'd love to. It's I gotta tell you, it's kind of easier than it looks. So yeah, it's not that complicated. So you can get it set up pretty quickly. But I think that's good because it's like so important. It'd be great, and that'd be interesting to have HR people on and get their ideas of what's happening, what they're
Yeah.
doing, what they're not doing. So
A dish.
yeah,
Although most HR people aren't very good at dish. They're always so
no.
close mouthed. I'm with people that are ready to retire so I can hear them.
Right, right. They get the real estate. So, all right. I know you have to go, so I don't want to keep you.
Thank
Good
you. This
luck.
has been so much fun.
Yes, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And seriously, if you really want to do that, let me know. I'll be glad to help out with it. And I
Thanks.
would love to be the first guest. It'd be awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.